There's a famous experiment where rats were given a lever to press for cocaine. After learning that the lever released massive dopamine, the rats began pressing it over and over again. They didn't stop when they were full. They didn't stop when they were tired. Some of them pressed the lever until exhaustion. Some until death. This experiment became one of the foundational models of addiction in humans. But here's where it gets disturbing. When the cocaine was removed, the rats eventually stopped pressing the lever. However, after some time, when those same rats were exposed to an intense painful foot shock, the very first thing they did was run back and start pressing the lever again. Not for pleasure. For escape. It revealed something critical about the brain. When an organism is under extreme stress, it becomes far more vulnerable to compulsive behavior because the brain has already encoded high dopamine rewards as a way out of pain. And that single mechanism explains more about modern addiction than most people realize. Now bring this out of the laboratory. Because today, the lever is no longer made of metal. It's made of glass. It lights up. It vibrates. It scrolls. And it follows you everywhere. What the rat was pressing for dopamine, humans now swipe for. Short-form videos did not become powerful because they are entertaining. They became powerful because they are neurologically precise. Every swipe delivers a small, unpredictable reward. A joke. A shock. A face. A fact. A body. A story. A conflict. A surprise. And your brain is not designed to resist unpredictable rewards. It is designed to chase them. Dopamine is not the chemical of pleasure. It is the chemical of pursuit. It rises not when you enjoy something, but when you anticipate something. And short-form platforms are built entirely around anticipation. The next video might be better. The next one might be funnier. The next one might matter. The next one might change how you feel. So the brain never closes the loop. It stays in seeking mode. And a brain locked in seeking mode begins to change. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity. Your brain physically rewires itself around whatever patterns it repeats the most. What you scroll becomes what your nervous system prepares for. Fast novelty trains fast attention. Emotional spikes train emotional dependency. Constant stimulation trains discomfort with stillness. Over time, the dopamine system becomes hypersensitive. Not more satisfied. More restless. This is why many people today don't feel exhausted, they feel unable to settle. Silence feels wrong. Long videos feel heavy. Books feel slow. Conversations feel incomplete. Thought feels interrupted. Because the brain has learned a new normal. A normal where stimulation arrives every few seconds. And when that stimulation disappears, something else appears. Craving. Irritability. Emptiness. Mental noise. This is the same pattern seen in classic addiction studies. Not because phones are drugs, but because dopamine circuits don't care where stimulation comes from. They only care that it is fast, emotional, and unpredictable. And once those circuits become dominant, they begin to override others. The circuits of focus. The circuits of emotional regulation. The circuits of long-term reward. The circuits of patience. The circuits of meaning. The brain does not lose these systems. It starves them. And a starved system becomes weak. This is why short-form overexposure does not usually look like collapse. It looks like drift. You still function, but your attention fractures faster. Your motivation fades quicker. Your boredom tolerance drops. Your emotional reactions intensify, and your mind quietly begins outsourcing relief to the nearest screen. Just like the rat. Not for pleasure. For escape. Once the dopamine system is trained into constant seeking mode, the effects do not stay isolated to scrolling behavior. Dopamine circuits sit at the center of how motivation, attention, and emotional regulation work. When they are overstimulated, they begin to distort all three. Attention becomes the first casualty. The human brain evolved to focus in long arcs. Long enough to track seasons, relationships, threats, and meaning. But short-form content fragments attention into microbursts. Seconds. Moments. Emotional flashes. The brain adapts by shortening its own focus window. It stops investing deeply because nothing stays long enough to reward depth. Over time, sustained concentration begins to feel physically uncomfortable. Not boring. Heavy. As if the brain itself resists staying. At the same time, the reward system becomes less responsive to normal life. Dopamine works on contrast. The more intense and frequent the spikes, the flatter everything else feels. Conversations become dull. Reading becomes effort. Work feels empty. Even rest starts to feel unsatisfying. This is not because life lost value. It is because the brain recalibrated what stimulating means. Emotional regulation is next. Short-form platforms are built on emotional volatility. Humor, outrage, attraction, fear, admiration, shock. Each swipe delivers a new emotional state. The nervous system never stabilizes. It jumps. And the more it jumps, the worse it becomes at settling. This is why many people today don't feel calm even when nothing is wrong. Their baseline has shifted. Under the surface, neuroplasticity is doing what it always does. Strengthening what is used. Weakening what is not. The brain is not trying to protect meaning, focus, or peace. It is trying to optimize the environment it lives in. If that environment is fast, stimulating, and endless, the brain will reshape itself to match it. And a brain shaped for endless stimulation does not handle silence well. One of the most misunderstood parts of modern screen dependence is why people often continue even when they no longer enjoy it. They scroll without interest. They refresh without curiosity. They open apps without intention. This is not pleasure behavior. It is regulation behavior. The dopamine system is not only about reward. It is about relief. When overstimulation becomes normal, the absence of stimulation begins to register as a problem. The brain experiences it as discomfort, restlessness, or emotional flatness. And the fastest way it has learned to resolve that discomfort is to return to the stimulus. This is why stopping feels harder than continuing. Not because the content is irresistible, but because the nervous system has been trained to expect it. Over time, the brain builds an association between internal unease and external relief. Between stress and scrolling. Between boredom and brightness. Between emotional friction and escape. This is the same mechanism seen in classical addiction models. The object changes. The circuitry does not. The brain becomes less about choice and more about prediction. When it senses discomfort, it predicts the fastest known regulator. And prediction drives behavior before reflection has time to intervene. This is where many people blame themselves. They call it lack of discipline, weak will, low motivation. But what they are experiencing is not moral failure. It is learned wiring. And learned wiring always feels personal. Let me ask you something quietly. When was the last time you felt mentally still without needing to reach for something? The important thing to understand is that nothing happening here is permanent. The same neuroplasticity that builds these patterns is what allows them to change. But the brain does not rewire through intention. It rewires through exposure. It weakens what is no longer repeatedly activated. It strengthens what is consistently reintroduced. When stimulation is reduced, dopamine sensitivity slowly recalibrates. When attention is trained on fewer inputs, focus networks begin to rebuild. When emotional swings decrease, regulation systems recover. Not instantly, not dramatically, but biologically. At first, the absence of constant novelty feels like loss. Then it feels like emptiness. And then, gradually, it begins to feel like space. Space is where the brain starts restoring itself. This is where boredom stops being a problem and becomes a signal. Where silence stops being threatening and becomes neutral. Where attention starts lengthening again. Where ordinary life slowly regains emotional texture. The brain does not heal by being forced. It heals by being allowed. Allowed to experience slower reward. Allowed to experience sustained effort. Allowed to experience emotion without escape. Allowed to rest without stimulation. This is not about rejecting technology. It is about understanding what constant exposure trains your nervous system to expect. Because what your brain expects, it becomes. If this documentary helped you see your mind more clearly, consider subscribing to Neuro Plain. This channel explores how the brain shapes behavior, emotion, identity, and time in the modern world. And if this topic resonated, share in the comments what you've noticed short-form content changing in your own attention or emotions. Your experience might be the reflection someone else needs. The brain is always learning. The only question is what environment it is learning from.